Hi guys, my name is Kyla and I am here to talk about my presentation on Alan Alexander Milne. He is the creator of Winnie the Pooh, and I chose him because he is also, he's an author and he is also a poet. And I also chose him because I feel a lot of us grew up with Winnie the Pooh, whether it was stories we were read to as a child, or just cartoons that we watched or toys that we played with. And I kind of thought it would be cool to get to know the person who created such a wide known character all over the world. So in the beginning of my presentation, I talk about when he was born, which was January 18th, 1882, and he was born to the parents of John Milne and to Sarah Milne, and his father actually owned a private school in London, and he had a teacher there, which was a very famous teacher. H.G. Wells. He taught there for 1 year, but in that 1 year, Alan was able to study under him. So I'd like to believe that he probably learned a lot of cool things and just interesting things about how to be a writer and just how to get certain things started. He then later attended Cambridge, and that's where he earned his degree in mathematics, which was in 1903. And then he was actually, he had joined the military and served and was stationed in France, and that is where he got sick with trench fever, and he was sent back home. And after he was sent back home, he turned a lot of his attention to playwriting. And then on the next slide, I talk about just some of his works before Winnie the Pooh, like Mr. Brum Passes, which was created in 1921, and Michael and Mary, which was created in 1930, The Red House Mystery, which was created in 1922, and then I talk about how he was actually known pretty well for some of these novels, but Winnie the Pooh kind of overshadowed a lot of his works. I talk about that a little bit at the end, about just the two of his works that kind of made it into the 21st century, which were both Winnie the Pooh's series. But yeah, then I go on to the description of just kind of how Winnie the Pooh came about and kind of like what got it started. I didn't know this, but Winnie the Pooh was actually based off of, or Christopher Robin was actually based off of his son. It wasn't a fictional character. His son had a whole bunch of stuffed toys, and he basically used his son a little bit to inspire his works with Winnie the Pooh. And then I later talk about kind of how that created a little bit of a void and resentment towards father and son. Christopher Robin kind of felt as if his father was using his childhood and exploiting his childhood, and they had a huge falling out and didn't talk for years. So that was a little sad because, you know, most of us remember Winnie the Pooh as a happy character. We remember Christopher Robin as a happy little boy. And to now know that the backstory of it wasn't kind of the same is a little sad. I also go over some fun facts about how Winnie the Pooh got his name. His original name was supposed to be Edward, and they talk about a little bit how him and his son, Christopher Robin, would go to the zoo in London, a very famous one, and there was a big black bear there that his son was obsessed with, and that bear's name at the zoo was Pooh. And so he ended up changing Winnie the Pooh's name from Edward to Winnie the Pooh, which was quite interesting. I go over the main characters, Tigger, Eeyore, Piglet, Kangaroo, and her little baby. And like I said before, all of these characters were original toys that his son used to play with. And there's actually a museum now that have the original toys locked away, which is kind of cool. And I put a bunch of pictures actually of the original toys in my presentation, so you'll get to see kind of what Winnie the Pooh was based off of, because he doesn't really look like Winnie the Pooh. And then I go over just the fame. Milne wasn't too fond of his fame. He, like I stated before, he was a freelance writer, so he was able to kind of write whatever he wanted. And then when Winnie the Pooh came out, people only kind of wanted him to write more of that. And then it also overshadowed a lot of his previous work, so he wasn't too fond about that. And then he wasn't too fond about his son just being thrown into the spotlight so fast. And I put in some quotes that him himself said about how he didn't want his son C.R. Milne to ever want to change his name to Charles Robert. But that didn't stop them from having that huge falling out, like I talked about. And yeah, so then I go over the dates of when he passed, which was January 31st, 1956. And I talk about the rights to Milne's beloved Pooh books, which were left to 4 beneficiaries. And then over time, Walt Disney was able to buy Winnie the Pooh and kind of create their own with it. And I also talk a little bit about his religious beliefs. He wasn't too big about sharing his religious beliefs, but he did talk about how he was a pacifist, but he joined the war. And the reason why he did so is, in his own words, in fighting Hitler, he wrote, "We are truly fighting the Antichrist. Hitler was a crusader against God." And then there's a couple poems where he talks about Elizabeth Ann said to her Nan, "Please will you tell me how God began? Somebody must have made him. So who could it be? Because I want to know." But yeah, that's really the only times he ever talks about his religion. And then I also go over kind of his donations, what he did when he was alive, and then what he also did after he had died. He had donated 1/4 of the copyrights of Winnie the Pooh to Westminster School, and that is the school that he attended for a little bit. And then I also talk about how that school, that's the highest donation that school to this day has ever received. And then I also go over a little bit of the net worth of Winnie the Pooh, just to kind of give people an insight of how big and how fast it kind of took off, and how much it's still taking in. In 2002, Forbes ranked Winnie the Pooh the most valuable fictional character. In 2005, Winnie Pooh generated 6 billion figures, and the only other character to surpass that was Mickey Mouse. But yeah, that was really crazy to see. This Winnie the Pooh was created in the 1900s, and it is now 2019, and it's still getting money to this day. And then I also talk about some of the quotes and his poetries that he did. I'm a huge fan of poetry, and although I was a huge fan of Winnie the Pooh as a child, I'm still a fan of Winnie the Pooh as an adult. His poetry is, in some ways, is a little dark, but it's very, in my opinion, it's very spot on. It kind of just talks about the dark trials that we kind of have to go through. But yeah, I see his poetry as just being very beautiful, but being very real. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoy my presentation. I hope you guys learn a bunch of new facts, kind of like what I did. And yeah, I hope you enjoy.